Today's lesson is the last one in our series on cell structures, and this one is about the mitochondria and the chloroplasts. Mitochondria and chloroplasts are the organelles that convert energy to forms that cells can use for work. So the mitochondria takes glucose and converts it into ATP, and the chloroplast takes energy from the sun to make ATP and carbohydrates. ATP is cellular energy. It is the form of energy that your cells can use, and carbohydrates are stored energy. There are a lot of similarities in the mitochondria and the chloroplasts. They both are involved in the transformation of energy. They are both double membraned structures. They are semi-autonomous, which means that they can move, change shape, and they can replicate on their own. In addition to that, they have internal ribosomes, DNA, and their own enzymes. So this is unlike any other organelle. The specific function of the mitochondria is to do a process called cellular respiration. The purpose of cellular respiration is to generate ATP from the breakdown of sugars, fats, and other fuels that cells consume. It occurs in the presence of oxygen, and it's called aerobic respiration. That's another name for it. And they break larger molecules into smaller ones to generate energy, which is a form of catabolism. The structure of the mitochondria is a two-membrane structure with a highly folded inside that's called the cristae. That increased surface area is so that there can be more membrane-bound enzymes to synthesize ATP. There is fluid in between those two membranes. That's called the mitochondrial matrix in the very center, and that is where the DNA and the ribosomes and the enzymes are located inside the mitochondria. Here's the structure of the mitochondria. So you have this outer membrane, and then you have this folded inner membrane, and then that matrix inside that has all of the DNA and ribosomes. This is the process of cellular respiration right here. So this is the mitochondrial membrane going right across here. These are the different proteins that are embedded in that membrane, and their goal is to produce ATP. We will learn more specifically about this process in another video. The mitochondria can divide on its own. So you want to think about who else divides like this. It's very basic division where you start out with one and it just splits right down the middle to make a second one. And this is very similar to the process that bacterial cells use to divide called binary fission. And we're going to talk about this evolutionary significance of this in a little bit, but I want you to start trying to put those pieces together yourself. Almost all eukaryotic cells have mitochondria. Sometimes there is one large mitochondria, or there could be hundreds to thousands of individual mitochondria. The number of them is correlated with the amount of energy need for that cell or the amount of metabolic activity. So more energy is needed. That means you have more mitochondria. Chloroplasts are specific to plants. They are in a group of plant structures called plastids. There are different ones. There are amyloplasts, chromoplasts, and chloroplasts. Chloroplast is the one that we will specifically talk about, but you should be familiar with the other two. The chloroplast is also a double membrane, so there's an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And inside there are these little stacks here. Those are called thylakoids. Those thylakoids are also made of membrane, and that is where all the ATP is made. When they're in a stack, they're called grana, but I think if you just know thylakoids, that would be sufficient. Again, that internal space where there's fluid is filled with DNA, ribosomes, and enzymes, just like the mitochondria. This is the process that occurs in that membrane of the thylakoids, It looks very similar to the process that we just looked at for cellular respiration. These are the light reactions of photosynthesis. Again, there's your membrane of one of those thylakoid discs and all those proteins. And again, the end product is to make ATP. And we will talk about this in another video. So the chloroplasts are for photosynthesis, to generate ATP and to help synthesize sugars. And they are, again, semi-autonomous, meaning that they can move, change shape, divide, and reproduce by pinching in two, just like the bacteria can do. Chloroplasts are green because that is the color, the wavelength of light that they reflect. So they absorb red, yellow, blue, and purple. So red and bluish purple are actually the colors that are responsible for photosynthesis. So the mitochondria and chloroplasts are a little bit different. They are not part of the endomembrane system. They do not have the same functions as the rest of those organelles. They grow and reproduce separate from the rest of the organelles. They have their own genetic material in them. So they are different from the rest of the structures that we've looked at so far. The evolutionary significance here of these organelles is that it is believed that they were once free-living bacteria that were engulfed by another, either mitochondria or a chloroplast, and then they started to live one inside the other, which is called an endosymbiont. And as a partnership, we've developed the first eukaryotic cell. So we have something that produces energy inside of another membrane-bound structure. And as a result of that, we believe that this is the evolutionary pathway that we have developed eukaryotic cells that have more complex small organelles inside larger ones. And our evidence is that the chloroplast and mitochondria can self-replicate. They have their own genetic material. They have enzymes and ribosomes very similar to an ancestral prokaryotic cell. And your final thoughts for today, one for each organelle.